And the international trade minister is still in South America on his trip to Brazil and Colombia. There's been lots of handshakes, but as these trips produce broad agreements without dollar values attached, what have they really done to secure Canada's trade future? Adam Chambers is the Conservative international trade critic, and he joins me now. Hi, sir. Thanks for coming on. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me here, JP.
So the Prime Minister signed agreements with Poland, Germany, and Latvia during his swing through Europe. He's trying to open up new markets with the Canada-U.S. relationship on shaky ground. But the Conservatives, I take it, are not giving this trip very good reviews. Tell me why.
Well, look, I would say I've been around politicians long enough to judge them by what they do, not just by what they say. And, Mr. Carney ran during the election saying that Canada had to act faster than we've ever acted before. And yet, we're seeing lots of words, but as you mentioned in the lead-in here, no dollar values, not a lot of substance in what we say. So while some people may find these actions promising, I think we'll reserve judgment until we actually see some substance and some meat on the bone.
Pierre Poilievre said yesterday that essentially nothing had been accomplished in Germany by the Prime Minister, but we saw that ruffled the feathers a little bit of the German ambassador. I don't know if you saw this, but he took to social media to gently chastise Mr. Poilievre, and he says that there was progress made in jointly developing Canada's critical minerals, and that, that's, quote, far from nothing. What's your message to the Germans who are a little peeved?
Well, actually, I feel a little bit sorry for the Germans in that, it wasn't that long ago the Chancellor was over visiting former Prime Minister Trudeau, and we sent him home empty-handed, saying that there wasn't a business case for LNG. And now the Liberal government has flip-flopped on itself and reversed this decision. So in one way, I think it's encouraging that we're realizing that we should be selling LNG to Europe, but I recognize that the Germans are in a little bit of a difficult spot because not that long ago this Liberal government had the exact opposite position that it seems to have today.
Yeah, of course. Prime Minister Trudeau saying there's no business case. I've had the German ambassador on this week. I've had the Polish ambassador on this week, and both said they are very much open to Canadian LNG. And the Prime Minister has changed his tune. At least this is a different kind of Liberal, if you will, because he says he's willing to supply an energy-hungry Europe with LNG. He says there are enormous opportunities to develop LNG in this country, a lot different than what we heard from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Are you happy about that about-face?
Well, look, as I said previously, I think we have to judge a government by its actions, and we haven't yet seen anything announced in terms of being able to deliver LNG to Europe. I mean, they're begging for it. In fact, they say they even buy discounted LNG through America. So, it's nice that we're hearing some things from the Liberal government that seem different than Prime Minister Trudeau, but we actually haven't seen much in the way of anything being delivered or concretely suggested that would give us some comfort that we're actually going to be able to secure these deals. And so that's what's important for us. Conservatives have been consistent for the last decade that we need to be selling our energy to the world. By the way, cleaner energy to the world. Canadian LNG is much cleaner than some LNG you can get in other parts of the world, and certainly much better than getting it from countries like Russia.
Mr. Poilievre also panned the Prime Minister's decision to lift some of the retaliatory tariffs last week. He says, if he was in charge, he would put in countermeasures on the Americans. Do you support hitting the U.S. with more tariffs?
Well, if we look at Mr. Carney's rhetoric during the campaign, and then we judge him by what his actions have been since the campaign, it's basically the complete opposite of what he promised Canadians during the campaign. He campaigned on, we'll have our elbows up, we're going to drop our gloves when someone challenges us. But every single decision that Prime Minister Carney has made since the campaign has been completely the opposite. He has given many concessions to the Americans, yet it is unclear whether we've gotten anything in return. Maybe that's why President Trump basically endorsed Mr. Carney during the campaign and said he didn't really like Pierre Poilievre that much because we would have been maybe more difficult to negotiate with.
But do you support tariffs? Do you think that's a prudent approach?
JP, I think you have to, we're not at the negotiating table currently. We don't know what's going on. Is it possible that the only way to get Americans talking to Canadians again was to reverse the tariffs? I'm not sure. But we have to look at the entirety of the deal when we do see a deal. to judge Mr. Carney on whether he's able to secure one. I mean, Mr. Carney said he wanted the job. We had to hire, he said, hire me, hire the Liberal Party because we'll be able to negotiate to Donald Trump and stand up to him. Yet, his actions are not in keeping with that same promise.
As you have mentioned, there have been some concessions. We dropped the digital services tax. We did not match U.S. retaliatory tariffs on steel and aluminum and autos and lumber. And now we've just dropped the retaliatory tariffs on some of the other goods that we had in place. There have been concessions, and there hasn't been a deal. They blew past that August 1st deadline. There were some talks this week, but Dominic LeBlanc, the minister charged with negotiating this deal, left Washington earlier than planned. How soon does Mr. Carney have to come up with a deal to satisfy you, to show you that those concessions were worthwhile?
Well, to be fair to the government, negotiating with the Americans is not an easy task. They are, have picked battles and fights with many other countries. So, Mr. Carney has a tall task ahead of him. I do think, though, questions need to be asked about the extreme change in strategy. Was Mr. Carney even committed to tariffs in the first place? Did he mislead Canadians by saying he would have elbows up knowing he was going to make concessions in the future? Or is this truly the only way that we could get the Americans talking to us again? But even if that is true, JP, we have to ask ourselves how we got here in the first place. Mr. Trump's actions and tariffs are unjustifiable and not in keeping with the spirit of NAFTA. That is the most important point. But the second is liberals, senior liberals who are still senior Liberal cabinet ministers, and even the prime minister himself and the former Liberal prime minister has spent the last 10 years actually harming the relationship with Americans, antagonizing them. You just mentioned the digital services tax. There's the global minimum tax. There's the electric vehicle mandate, which, by the way, there is no possible way that our government is going to be able to continue that, not just because it's antagonizing to the Americans, but because it's just absolutely nonsense policy for Canadians here at home. And these are actions that the Liberals have taken that haven't just antagonized Republicans. And President Biden warned very starkly against imposing a global minimum tax before the rest of the world did, and a digital services tax. He warned Mrs. Freeland of that when she was the finance minister. She is still a senior minister in the Liberal government. The Democrats warned the Liberals that this would be a problem for the relationship. Republicans have warned the Liberals that this would be a problem for the relationship. And the only bipartisan consensus in America right now is that the Canadian relationship with the Americans has been strained. So I think, we have to be self-reflective about how we got here. We need to figure out a way to get out together. Conservatives have mentioned to Mr. Carney, we've offered our hand of support, whatever we can do to help secure a deal, by the way, that Mr. Carney promised he could get, we would be willing to do. But I think it's still fair to ask questions as we go through this process. Why are we reversing the strategy? How did we get here in the first place? And how do we get out of it together?
All right, let's leave it there. Adam Chambers is the conservative international trade critic. Appreciate your time, sir. Nice to see you.
Thanks, JP.